welcome to the Jayda InStitches show. It's time for the November edition to our 2019 folk art calendar blanket. It's hard to believe we're already at November, but here we are. And this month we're headed back to the farm. We just had to add an animal to our farm. So we've cooked up a horse. It's a simple silhouette. We're going to make it all in one piece, and then we're going to add his little mane and his tail on afterwards. Just like the rest of the appliques on this blanket, you're going to be using the same weight yarn and the same fiber content to make your horse. You don't need very much. It's really a scrap project, so if you have any other projects you want to add a horse to, then consider this horse, of course. So let's grab our hooks, grab our yarn, we'll head on over to the craft table, and we will stitch up a horse for our 2019 folk art calendar blanket together. Please visit our shop and purchase a pattern. It helps support our show, and we'll put a link to our shop in the description box down below. In order to make our horse appliques, I'm using a size 4 medium weight acrylic yarn. It's the same yarn as the rest of my blanket. I don't need very much for this, about 35 to 40 yards or 12 to 15 grams will do of the horse color, and a small amount of color for his tail and his mane. In this case, I've used black. You need a pair of scissors, a yarn needle, and the hook we're using is a 5.5 millimeter, also known as an I or a 9 in the US, a size 5 in the UK. And once you've got all that together, make sure you've got your blankets too, and we can get started. We're going to begin with a slip knot. And we're going to chain 10 to start. Once you have 10 chains, we're going to skip the first chain from the hook, find the second one, and we're going to work 3 half double crochets into it. So 3 half double crochets into that second chain from the hook. So it'll look something like that. And then you're going to work a half double crochet into each of the next 7 chains. So you should have 3 half double crochet in the second chain from the hook and a single half double crochet or 1 half double crochet in each of those 7 chains. That leaves you with 1 chain left. We're going to work 3 half double crochet into this last chain. And now we're going to sort of flip our work so that we are looking at the bottom of those foundation chains. And you're going to work a half double crochet into each of those 7 chains that are underneath the single or the 1 half double crochets that run across the top. So your 2 end chains are already taken. There's 3 half double crochet in each of them, but there's 7 chains in the middle. You're going to work a half double crochet into the bottom of each of those all the way across. Once you get all the way back to the beginning, you should have 26 half double crochet stitches in total all the way around. We're going to join with a slip stitch to that first half double crochet we made. So just slip stitch to join, and you should have something that looks like that. This is the very center of the horse body. Row 2, we're going to start with a chain. We're not turning our work, we're going to continue going in the same direction. And into that same stitch that we joined in, so this one right here, we're going to work 2 single crochet. So we're switching to the single crochet stitch now. You're going to work 2 single crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. So that's going to create a nice curve going around the front and eventually also the back end of our horses. So 2 single crochet into each of those 3 stitches on the end. That will leave you with 7 stitches in the middle. You're going to work a single crochet into each of those 7 stitches, and that will bring us up to the next curve. 7 single crochet later, that brings us up to the next curve. The next curve starts here, so it's not this one, it's this one here, and you should have 7 single crochets worked across that edge. We're going to work 2 single crochet into each of the next 3 stitches, so to turn or to curve around the other side of our horse. So 2 single crochet into each of those 3 stitches that run around the curve. And you're going to have 7 real stitches left. So 7 real stitches left. This one right here is what we call the false stitch. It's created when you slip stitch to join a row when you're working in the round. So we're actually going to ignore that stitch. So you should just have 7 stitches to concern yourself with. You're going to work a single crochet into each of those 7 stitches. Once you've worked a single crochet into each of those 7 stitches, you're going to skip that false stitch. It doesn't count. You're going to join with a slip stitch to the top of the first single crochet that began the row. You'll have 32 stitches all the way around. And if we bring in our little horse here, we have created the body. We are now going to create the neck, ear, and head part of our horse. Like I said, the whole thing is made in one piece. So we're not fastening off, we're not turning. We're going to chain 7. So that's 7 chains. Consider that the back of the neck and the top of the ear of our horse. We're going to form the ear by slip stitching into the second chain from the hook. So skip the first one, slip stitch into the second chain from the hook. We've just made his little ear. See that little tiny pointy triangle? Now we're going to chain 5. This is the top of his face. So if you just have to hold it, you're just worried about these 5 chains for now. We're going to skip the first chain from the hook. We're going to single crochet into the second chain. And then we're going to half double crochet into each of the next 3 chains. So half double crochet into the next 3 chains. So the face of your horse will consist of a single crochet and 3 half double crochets. That brings us up to our ear. See, there's your little ear hanging out the bottom. You're going to skip over the bottom of your ear. So if it helps, put your thumb and forefinger on it. And you should have 5 chains left. So 5 chains. You're going to single crochet into this chain right here. So skip over your ear, single crochet into that 5th from the body chain. And if you want to pause, you can see there's the ear and the head and face of our little horse. So we skip over the ear, we single crochet into that next chain. You're going to half double crochet into the next chain. And you're going to double crochet into the last 3 chains. So single crochet, half double crochet, and then double crochet 3 times into those last 3 chains. You're going to skip, so here's where we're joined and we chained out of. You're going to skip that next stitch and actually slip stitch to join in the stitch after that. And our horse is going to look a little aloof for a moment. His head's going to want to sort of point upwards, but that's okay, because when you're sewing him down, you can sort of move his head or bend his neck. So we've got the body, the neck, the ear, and the head now. We want to add the 2 legs to our horse, so we're not turning, we're not chaining. Instead, right from where we've joined our neck to the body, we're going to slip stitch into the next 4 stitches. So just slip stitch, not too tight, not too loose. You're going to slip stitch around the chest of your horse. So slip stitch into the 4 stitches following the join of our neck. And now we're going to chain 8. Once you've got 8 chains for your leg, be careful not to let them twist on you. We're going to skip the first chain from the hook and slip stitch into the second chain. Not too tight, not too loose. Then we're going to slip stitch into each of the next 3 stitches. That will leave you with 3 chains left, and you're going to single crochet into each of those 3 chains. And that's the leg of your horse. So you chain 8, skip the first chain from the hook, slip stitch into the next 4, single crochet into the next 3, so your leg is 7 stitches long. When you get back to the body, you're going to skip over a stitch and slip stitch into the next stitch to anchor your leg so that he sits up right there. Now we're going to slip stitch into each of the next 5 stitches. You want to make sure they're not too tight or too loose. So you've slip stitched across the belly of your horse, and now we're going to make leg number 2. So just like the first one, we're going to chain 8 to begin. Leg number 2 is just like leg number 1. We're going to skip over the first chain from the hook, slip stitch into each of the next 4 chains, single crochet into each of the next, or the last, 3 chains, that brings us back up to the top. We're going to skip the next whole stitch, slip stitch into the one after that, snip your yarn, make sure you leave yourself a nice long tail, and if you're nearly at the end of your yarn, just leave it, fasten off, and pull that nice and tight. And there is the outline, the silhouette of our horse. Now all we want to do is add his mane and his tail, so you can grab that color now. First, we're going to embroider a simple little mane on him. So we're just basically wrapping yarn over the top edge of his neck, but just underneath the bottom edge of his neck. And we're just going to knot it on the back, nothing special. It will be sewn down so you won't see the back side of your horse. So cut yourself a nice length of yarn. I'm using black for my mane, but you can use whatever color you want. We're going to take our needle and bring it in just underneath his ear. And you're going to leave a little bit of tail out the back. You might want to keep your fingers, sort of tuck it underneath his head and just hold it for a little while, just so you've got something to knot it with later. Then we're going to start by running our needle underneath, so just through the edge of the, we're not going over the edge of the underside of his neck, we're going just through the bottom of the stitch. And don't pull too tightly, you want nice straight lines. And now we're going to go over top, so we're going over top of the top edge to cover the top edge, but always through the spot, that bit of the stitch, so not over the edge on the bottom, only over the edge on the top. So you see we're going to end up covering the top edge, and we're going to do, let's see, we've got 2 little starters there. We're going to move to the next, and we're going to work 2 stitches through each of these neck stitches. So 2 embroidery stitches, always running over the top edge of the neck, but through the stitch so that it's not over the bottom edge of the bottom of the neck. And remember, don't pull anything too tight. Once you've got a couple of stitches down, you can probably let go of that short tail. And if your hairs or your little stitches look a little uneven, that's fine, because hair never usually looks even, especially on a horse that's running. Work a couple stitches. If you feel you want it a little thicker, you can run maybe 3 or 4 through the same place. It just depends on the thickness of your yarn and your preferences for a horse mane. Once you've filled in, working over top of the top edge of your neck and just underneath the stitches along the bottom edge of your neck until you've got a nice long coverage of his neck for his mane. Wherever you wind up, you can always stick in a few extra stitches if you feel there were a few spaces or holes. Just take your yarn, run it underneath all of those loops. And back out through the top. Don't pull too tightly. And then you can just knot those two ends together. There you go. And trim any excess. And there's our horse's mane done. Now we want to add his tail, and we're actually going to crochet that. Take your mane and tail color and make a slip knot. We're going to attach our yarn to the back of our horse. So we don't want it at the very bottom. Horses' tails kind of come out of the top. So rather than the first curve, we're going to go with the second curve. But you can decide where you want your horse's tail to start. It should be somewhere near the top of the back of your horse. We're going to join with a slip stitch, and we're going to chain 9. Once you have 9 chains, skip the first chain from the hook and slip stitch into each of those 8 chains that are left, all the way back to your horse. Once you've slip stitched into each of those 8 chains, that brings you back to where you joined your yarn in the first place. You're going to slip stitch into the same stitch on the body of your horse and fasten off. You don't need very much tail. Make that nice and tight. And then, if you like, you can run the tail, sort of the tail ends, through the underside of the tail of your horse, or you can run them underneath some of the stitches at the back of your horse, just to sort of keep them from showing through. And you don't have to worry about trimming them. And there is the tail of our horse. Now all we have to do is sew our horse down to our blanket. First, you want to lay out your horse where you want him positioned. So I'm going to put mine between my tractor and my barn. I'm going to have his feet kind of just crossing over where that green kind of changes from one color to the next. But if you wanted to have him out here kind of grazing in some of your open field, you can do that too. You can even put in 2 horses if you want. There's enough room left over that you can do that. We are getting to the end of the blanket, so if you want to maybe fill in that space, feel free to add a couple horses or just one like I'm going to down here, kind of like he's returning to the barn. So once you've got him positioned where you want him, you can pin him into place if you want. You want to thread up the long tail you left behind on your needle, and we're going to start at the bottom of his rump and just sort of work our way all the way up and around. Most of this is exactly the same. You just want to pick up a piece of a stitch on the blanket and the edge of the stitch on your horse. So you've got a piece of a blanket stitch, you've got the edge of your horse, and you can, like I say, just pin it into place or hold it in place. And as you work, just keep sort of repositioning it, making sure it's not moving on you. We're going to do one little extra thing here though. So when we get to our next stitch, we're just going to grab a little piece of the tail. So you're going to pick up a piece of a blanket, pick up maybe about halfway through the bottom edge of your tail, just one little loop on your tail, so bottom loop of a tail. Then you're going to go through the next edge stitch of your horse. And that will keep your horse's tail just tacked in one little place so that a little bit of it sort of sits open. It looks like it's got a little bit of fluid movement, and you don't have to sew down the whole tail, so that's kind of nice. Then you've got just this one little stitch down here between sort of where his tail and the rest of his body is. You're going to run your needle underneath the tail. And then you're just going to sew down this edge here. And I'll catch up with you when we get to his neck. When you've sewn down his back and you get to his neck, the top part of his mane, we're just going to tack it from behind. So you're going to take your neck, pull it forward, run your needle underneath the first few embroidered loops of his mane. And then you're just going to run your hook, or I should say your needle, underneath a loop of a blanket stitch that's directly underneath the neck of your horse. And then run your needle through a few more of the underside of those main stitches. And then you can continue sewing out the other side. So you want to go up and over the ear and around his face and then back down. And it's the same sort of sewing now from here on out. And that just tacks your neck down, but it doesn't interrupt the color that runs across the back of the neck of your horse. Once you've finished sewing all the way around the outside edge of your horse, you can make a small little knot at the side of your horse. Make it as tiny and as small as possible. And if you're using a yarn that you feel might come undone, feel free to knot it a second time. And then you can just run your needle up underneath those edge stitches of your horse, and you can weave your tail back and forth through some of those stitches in the body. Back and forth 1 or 2 times, and then trim any excess. And he's a good neighbor too. Oh my gosh. All right, so we have added a horse. We've got a barnyard animal for our farm. It's the second last addition to our folk art calendar blanket before we put on a simple little border. We hope you enjoyed making the horse along with us, and we will see you soon for another edition of the Jayda and Stitches show. Until then, stay safe, stay crafty, and have an awesome week. Bye everybody.
Hi everyone, this is Mama in Stitches. Thank you for watching. Here are a few other videos you might enjoy. Don't forget to subscribe, and you can also click the like button and the bell. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.